Good evening. The television and radio stations of the United States and their affiliated stations are proud to provide facilities for a discussion of issues in the current political campaign by the two major candidates for the presidency. The candidates need no introduction. The Republican candidate, Vice President Richard M. Nixon, and the Democratic candidate, Senator John F. Kennedy.
The 1960 presidential debates, held from September 26 through October 21st between Vice President Richard Nixon and Senator John F. Kennedy, was broadcast on both the radio and television, garnering the attention of around 100 million viewers in total. The debates, coming at a time of increasing popularity of household televisions, marked a turning point in the way politicians presented themselves to voters. The 1960 debates proved to be a crucial turning point in elections, as the importance of television in American politics has grown exponentially. They also proved to have a lasting impact on U.S. elections, as presidential debates became a staple in American politics. The debates began a shift of appearance over substance by showing that voters heavily take notice of a candidate's appearance. Today, presidential debates serve as advertisements for politicians, as U.S. politics now resemble a form of entertainment. Candidates now try to create polarization by constantly attacking their opponents. While this has made debates less informative, they are still vital in American politics. Prior to the 1950s, radios were the most common method of broadcasting. As time progressed, television became increasingly popular among American households, replacing radios throughout the country. From 1949 to 1959, it was estimated that the amount of televisions owned in households across the U.S. grew from 172,000 to over 50 million. Before television was the primary method of communication with the American public, many politicians would campaign via the radio, with some such as Calvin Coolidge tuning into various radio stations across the country to communicate with voters. As politicians began to notice the increasing usage of television across the country, many began utilizing new campaign advertisements to appeal to voters. One example of this was Eisenhower's campaign jingle titled "I Like Ike," used in the 1952 election. When Eisenhower became president, he held the first televised presidential press conference. When Kennedy and his campaign staff realized how crucial television communication was in American politics, they proposed a series of debates between him and Vice President Richard Nixon to showcase Kennedy's views. Ultimately, this created a long-standing tradition in American politics. On January 2, 1960, Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts announced his candidacy for the presidency. A week later, on January 9th, Vice President Richard Nixon announced that he too would be seeking the presidency. During his time as vice president, Nixon participated in many debates, such as the kitchen debates with Nikita Khrushchev. Kennedy and his campaign staff proposed the idea of holding a series of debates on television. When Nixon heard of his offer, he was hesitant to accept because he knew the debates would give Kennedy much-needed exposure. In his memoirs, Nixon stated, "An incumbent seldom agrees willingly to debate his challenger, and I knew that the debates would benefit Kennedy more than me by giving his views national exposure, which he needed more than I did. But there was no way I could refuse to debate without having Kennedy and the media turn my refusal into a central campaign issue." Ultimately, Nixon accepted the offer. On September 26th, the first of 4 presidential debates was broadcast by CBS in Chicago, Illinois. This debate focused on domestic issues. Famously in the first debate, Nixon looked pale and disheveled due to a recent knee injury. Chicago Mayor Richard Daley, who was horrified by Nixon's appearance, said, "My God, they've embalmed him before he even died." Nixon's own running mate, Henry Cabot Lodge, even stated that he believed Nixon cost them the election that night due to his awful appearance. Kennedy, however, wore a suit that contrasted with the set's background and looked tanned. This historic moment led to those who listened on the radio to believe Nixon won, while those who listened to the debates on television believed Kennedy had won. This opinion was backed by Lyndon Johnson, who believed Kennedy performed poorly when he listened to the debates on the radio. Immediately after the first debate, Kennedy rose by 3 points according to Gallup Polling Institute. In both the second and third debates, Nixon took the offensive and attacked Kennedy more intensely, with certain Democrats such as the governor of South Carolina, James Burns, stating that he had energized his base the same way Kennedy had in the first debate. The third debate had also demonstrated how far technology had come in recent years, as Kennedy attended the debate electronically in New York while Nixon attended it from Los Angeles. The final debate, broadcast by ABC on October 21st, focused on foreign policy. Because there had been no other reference point for how viewership trends would be throughout the debates, foreign policy was covered last as suggested by Nixon's campaign staff. Polls conducted by Gallup had shown that by the time the debates ended, Kennedy had risen by a few points, likely due to a small boost candidates get after a series of debates conclude. Some argue that this small boost given to Kennedy was what actually won him the election due to how close the results were. Polls also found that roughly 3.4 million voted purely based on what they saw during the debates, with the majority of those voting for Kennedy. In hindsight, the post-debate momentum was likely a decisive element in securing Kennedy's victory in an election that was defined by its razor-thin margins. Kyle Kondik, the managing editor of Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia Center for Politics, agreed to answer the question, was there much for Nixon to gain from participating in the debates?
Arguably it was a mistake for Nixon to agree to the debates, and in fact, Eisenhower even suggested maybe he shouldn't do it. Eisenhower was the outgoing president at the time, and Nixon, was better known, more established, and so a common kind of front-runner strategy is just not to do the debate. And so we've seen this very recently with Donald Trump in the Republican presidential primary. He is the leading candidate. He has no reason to, he can't really benefit from the debates, or at least he feels that way. And his lack of participation has not really hurt him. I think it's reasonable to think, that it may have been a mistake for Nixon to participate. However, Nixon really wanted to use the debates to highlight his experience in foreign policy, which was a place where he felt strong and JFK had things to prove. So again, I think we can sort of see from how Nixon handled his 68 and 72 campaigns. If he thought the debates in 1960 had been some great success for him, probably would have tried to do them in 68 and 72, but obviously he didn't. Again, it's really hard to know if the election would have turned out differently without the debates. Seems reasonable to think that they could have, but it could have, but who knows?
On November 8, 1960, John F. Kennedy was declared the winner of the 1960 election, garnering 303 electoral votes in comparison to Nixon's 219. The 1960 election was one of the closest in American history, with Kennedy only winning the popular vote by a mere 112,000 votes. The debates helped shift politics in the direction of television and campaigning via political advertisements. In the following elections, candidates created more political ads that attacked their opponents, such as the famous Daisy ad that was created by Lyndon B. Johnson to attack Barry Goldwater, which aimed to create fear among voters. The 1960 debates proved to be influential throughout the rest of the century and even into today due to the precedent they set. In the subsequent elections, no debates between the candidates were held until 1976, largely because of the idea that a well-known candidate could give their opponent an advantage by agreeing to debate them. After 1976, when Ford agreed to debate Carter, the debates became a permanent staple of presidential elections. As a result of this debate and the historic first debates in 1960, many voters oftentimes consider a candidate's appearance and personality more over their actual policies, leading to certain voters feeling as if a candidate may have misled them or betrayed them. Though Nixon's sickly appearance in the first debate was not a major determinant of Kennedy's victory, the impacts of one's looks can still be felt in politics today. This idea was emphasized during the 1992 election when George W. Bush looked at his watch during a town hall. This seemingly small act greatly influenced how voters viewed him, as many thought that he was out of touch with the public or was bored by the questions voters were asking him. This may have played a small factor as to why Bush lost his re-election. In the 2016 Republican primary debates, Donald Trump attacked his opponents and called them various names, which displayed his strong personality to voters. Trump's debate performance played a significant role in his primary victory, further demonstrating the idea that how a candidate chooses to display themselves can greatly impact a voter's views. Today, elections are still impacted by televised debates. They particularly help candidates in primary elections who are unknown to the general public by allowing them to introduce their views. Presidential debates are most influential in close elections, as seen in both 1960 and 2000. The 1960 presidential debates proved to be a major turning point in United States politics by introducing the idea that appearance can have a profound effect on a voter's choice and influencing the way campaigns are structured around television in modern politics. Though presidential debates today may not be as likely to sway a voter between two candidates, the legacy of the debates between Nixon and Kennedy lives on due to how it has greatly changed the elections of the United States.